Welcome back to another episode of Diamond Podcast. I'm your host, local real estate agent, Alfredo Diamond. It's a pleasure to have you here. I've got a special guest today I'm so excited about. I've been on him and talking to him about being on this podcast for a while now. I want to introduce Jeff Plasterer, Wayne County Commissioner. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Alfredo. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I tell you this all the time, and I want to say it here publicly, I just want to thank you, man. And I'll tell you this, when I was a student at Ivy Tech, I was, probably second person in my family to attend college. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I knew it was the right thing I needed to be doing to set myself for the future, but I didn't really have no clue, and I was struggling. And you impacted my path in life, and I've told you this, and I thank you for that. And you just sat me down and explained to me, asked me what my schedule looked like, and you held me accountable, and I'll never forget that. Till this day, I time block, and it's so important. It's so important. I appreciate you for that. Thank you so much for that, Jeff.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. I mean, I spent 30 years at Ivy Tech in various positions, about a dozen as the director of admissions, and another 8 or 10 at the Connorsville Instructional Center as the executive director down there. I loved every minute of working with students, trying to help them decide on their plan. Mm-hmm. What do they want to do in life? It's such an important process to work through, mm-hmm. and education is the key. There are people you can point to who make huge amounts of money without an education, mm-hmm. A basketball player or a singer or mm-hmm. those kind of things. But in general, you earn based on your level of education. And a high school degree is not enough. Mm-hmm. You need to be a lifelong learner. You need to achieve credentials mm-hmm. and develop skills that will allow you to be a part of the economy. Mm-hmm. And the community needs for people to do that so that we have a trained workforce, that we can attract higher paying jobs. It's just a critical link in the chain and in the life of a community mm-hmm. and in individuals' lives.
Absolutely. And, looking back 25 years ago, in my experience with you, I mean, we both had been in situations or experience, I'm sure, where someone didn't go above and beyond to help you or didn't show care. Did someone inspire you to be that way? I mean, I know you're passionate about education, but you could have let me walk out that door and fail, but you took the time to speak up and say, hey, come here for a second. What inspired you to do that?
Wow. I think probably my parents, my dad in particular. My dad was a pediatrician. Okay. We came to Richmond as soon as he completed his residency in pediatrics. Way back in the early 1960s, I think mm-hmm. it was 61. I was about 3 years old. Mm-hmm. But my dad was always involved in the community, in the church, mm-hmm. And he was just a genuinely good person. Not that my mom wasn't. She was too. But my dad and I, we talked a lot about how do we improve the community, how do we help people achieve what they can in life. Mm-hmm. And so I was always a volunteer in the schools, a study buddy, wow. those kind of things. And I think that's important. And now I have a little different way of giving back to the community, but I've always been involved. I was, with the chamber. I was with United Way. And one of the things that got me interested in becoming a county councilman was being on the United Way's, at the time they called it the Fund Allocation Committee. I haven't kept touch with them recently, but it was a committee that looked at the agencies and their programs and determined based on how much money was raised in that year's campaign, how those dollars should be allocated across the requests that came to us from those agencies that were affiliated with United Way. And so that really got me involved in budgeting and that interest in looking at dollars available and setting priorities on how can we use these dollars to their best advantage. Got me interested in being involved in government. The county council is the fiscal body of Wayne County. And it just seemed to me that this was an opportunity to use some of the skills that I had developed in my work, and so I ran for the county council. I was not successful my first run, but I didn't give up. I went back 2 years later and ran again, and I spent 22 years on the county council, several of those years as president, and essentially as the fiscal body, the council determines how we allocate our revenue to prioritize the programs and the services that are available to Wayne County.
Wow. And I want to unpack some of that here, but let's take a step back. So,
Sure.
So, you got all this experience. Walk me through that. So, where'd you go to college? What was that like? And we'll talk if there's any influential experiences there. So, walk me through some of that.
Well, I went to Richmond High School. Spent my first year at Wabash College.
Okay.
I was kind of thinking in terms of going into law at that time, and I actually got involved in real estate.
I didn't know that.
I did, and so I bought some properties in Richmond, some rental properties. Was working on those. Got more interested in the business aspect, and Wabash was a liberal arts college, kind of preparatory for professional degrees, and so I transferred to Miami University in Oxford to get a degree in business. I did that, and I continued to work the real estate angle, and I came home. I knew I wanted to stay in Richmond, and at that point, got my real estate license. Excuse me.
You're fine. And you were buying property, real estate, and in college?
Correct.
How does that work?
Well, it kept me busy.
Yeah.
It kept me busy. But I'll tell you, this was I graduated in 1980. So I'm as old as I look, buddy. Trust me.
Born in 80.
So no more jokes about age.
Yeah.
But anyway, the opening years are actually the last year of the Carter administration, and then the first year of the Reagan administration. You think interest rates are high now, my friend?
Oh man, what 30% or something back then?
Well, mortgage rates.
Yeah.
When I got into real estate, mortgage rates were 12 to 15%.
Wow.
And so there was very little property being sold, and so as a brand new realtor, I didn't sell very much.
That's tough. Yeah.
I'm looking around. What's my next choice?
Yeah.
So I actually knew some folks that worked at Ivy Tech. They happened to have a position open, and so I started in admissions at Ivy Tech. At that time, it was Indiana Vocational Technical College, and that was the start of my 30-year career at Ivy Tech. So.
Wow.
It's it's a people business. It really is, and some of the conversations that we had, I had those every day. We had hundreds of students, thousands of students come through Ivy Tech during my tenure, and I really enjoyed meeting meeting the students and learning about their plans and what excited them and what did they really want to do. I spent some time as a career counselor where we would talk more in depth about what do you really want to do with your life, what direction do you want to go, and sometimes that meant there wasn't a program at Ivy Tech that could point them in that direction, take them in that direction. And so we'd talk about what are other opportunities around here. Obviously, in Richmond, we were blessed to have not only Ivy Tech, but IU East and Purdue programs and Earlham. And there were opportunities for anyone who had the motivation to get an education. And I was glad to be a small part of helping people achieve those goals.
Now, me personally, I got to go to college. I was a 21st century scholar, and that helped me aid in going to college. And I chose Ivy Tech. I earned some credit hours in high school through tool and die. So, I mean, you've got to see it all. So, growing up, I mean, no one in my family was going to college. We didn't have money for that. And I know there's a lot of other families like that. So, I think the 21st century scholarship program and other programs. So, you got to see some programs that were kind of pioneered and allowed others like me to go to college. How did that change things for you, having this influx of students coming in at one point?
Well, it was it's a great program. It helped a lot of particularly first generation students make that transition from high school to college. But I'll tell you, in my early days at Indiana Vocational Technical College, none of our credits transferred to IU, to Purdue, and that created roadblocks and challenges. And through the leadership of the president of the college at that time, Jerry Lampkin, there was a transitional phase where credits became transferable. There were common courses established. That English composition, I think, was one of the first classes that was transferable, and so that really opened a lot of doors because you could start at Ivy Tech, you could start at IU East. If you made the wrong initial step, you could correct that, and you didn't have to start over again. So that opened a lot of doors for people. But the scholarship programs and financial aid has benefited millions and millions of people across the country, and that is both an opportunity and a challenge, because in my years at Ivy Tech, there were people like you who took advantage of it and were appreciative and did it for the right reasons to pay for their schooling. There were others who took advantage of the federal government programs to get cash and didn't really have the drive to continue with school, but they put some money in their pocket. The financial aid available was more than the cost of tuition, and that was so sad to me that you've got this opportunity, take advantage of it,
and could be ruining it for someone else. That really
exactly. So it's I want to give you kudos because you worked hard and look where you're at now. So
I went on and get my master's too. I mean, you're probably pretty proud of that. But
absolutely,
all because you make sure I was on the right track. So, sure,
well, that's a very small part of it. Alfredo is all internal and family support and all of that. But to the extent that I was able to be helpful, I was happy to be able to do that.
Yes, sir. Aside from me, can you share over 30 years in education, and then we'll transition into, I think I got an idea why you kind of transitioned to where you are now, but can you share a success story where you really impacted either a family or a student?
Somebody other than you?
Other than me,
okay.
Other than me.
Well, a lot of times you never know. You work with students and you hope you're being helpful. And not every student that starts out at Ivy Tech would finish at Ivy Tech, or there may be a circumstance in their life where they had to drop out for a period of time, but came back to it later. And there are hurdles, enormous hurdles, and watching people overcome those barriers and really work through the issues. I really admire some of the young ladies who came to Ivy Tech who had young children and had to go through the process of making sure that their children had adequate child care, somebody to watch them while they came to school.
It's a lot of work, hard work.
It really is. And talk about barriers. That's huge. But time and time again, they worked through that. And Ivy Tech had some systems in place to provide emergency loans and special financial aid packages. I remember Ann Roja, the director of financial aid, when I was there for most of the time I was there, not all of it, but Ann used to work so hard to make sure that people had all of the financial aid that they needed to help them get through whatever issue they were faced with, and I mean that's really the key. And people to be successful, they've got to have the drive to overcome barriers. They've got to work through those issues, and again, that because you did it, but you're certainly not the only one, and unless you have the opportunity to meet people again later in life, you never know exactly what your impact was. But one of the things that I really enjoyed was being the advisor for the student government, and so to see students of all ages, whether they were right out of high school, excuse me, or coming back for retraining after a career in, let's say, a manufacturing plant that closed its doors, and in the early 2000s there were several of those that happened, but to work through the student government with those folks, and to work with them as they put in place programs that would help their fellow students reach their goals, whether it was through some small financial aid program or activities, to keep them connected to each other in the university and at school. One of the challenges Ivy Tech had was our schedule to try to accommodate people who were working, people who had limited time. Instead of meeting 3 times a week, like in a traditional university, most of our classes met once a week for a 3-hour block of time. Not all of them, but most of them did. And so people would come to school on let's say a Tuesday morning for one class and a Thursday night for another class. And so to connect them to the school was a challenge. They were here for a few hours and then they would leave. And obviously we're not a residential campus. So having some activities, having some supportive services that would keep people engaged, give them opportunities to meet their fellow students outside of the classroom was very rewarding. I was the advisor for the fishing club for a couple of years, and so cool. We went on some fishing trips with some of the students, and that was just a lot of fun.
And that's important to keep students engaged and coming back to school and being there for that supportive system. But you mentioned barriers as students, so as we shift gears into where you are now with dealing with politics and things like that. The rural community.
Let me stop you there because I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant.
Public servant. Okay.
Thank you.
So I imagine you transitioned so you can have a higher level overview to impact the people that you were serving in education.
Well, that's my hope, and I continue to strive for that. I actually left the college and went to work at an organization called the Eastern Indiana Regional Planning Commission,
Okay.
Which is an economic development planning agency that works in the surrounding 6 counties around Wayne County. I was the executive director there for 6 years, and all during that time I was a member of the county council.
Okay.
And after 22 years on the county council, I had the time and the opportunity, as one of my friends, Denny Burns, who was the commissioner at the time, representing Western Wayne County, he retired, and so I was able to run for that office and transition from the council to the commissioners. The commissioners are the executive and legislative branches of local county government. So the same work, really, the same challenges, but from a different slant, actually implementing and spending the budget that the council developed, but implementing and following up with those priorities that are set through the budgeting process.
So you have city council, and then the commissioners oversee
County council.
county council. Okay.
So the county government
Gotcha.
is separate from the city.
Okay.
City of Richmond's elected officials.
Okay.
So there are elements that of the county that include the city and the towns. There are other things that we do that are limited to the unincorporated areas. So planning and zoning, for example, would be one aspect of that. Maintenance of roads. Our responsibility for roads is outside of the city and town limits. Bridges, we have the responsibility to maintain all bridges, and bridges are defined as they have to be more than 20 feet to be classified as a bridge. But anything that is not on a state highway, any bridge that's not on a state highway, whether it's in the city or a town or in the unincorporated areas, are the responsibility of the commissioners.
Like the bridge on Northwest Fifth, something like that.
Or more recently, the G Street Bridge. We had a project there to renovate the G Street Bridge, which is a multi-million-dollar project, and that was overseen by the county.
Well, I'm going there next. So earlier on, you mentioned you maybe ran for commissioner. Correct me if I'm wrong, and didn't push through the first time. Then
County council.
County council.
Yeah.
And so then you finally pushed through, right?
Correct.
So walk me through that. So how'd you persevere in getting through, the challenge of not getting there the first time and then finally getting there?
Well, a political campaign was a completely new animal to me. So the first time I ran, probably wasn't as prepared as I should have been. I had the interest, but I didn't have the expertise, if you will. And so when the outcome was apparent that I had lost, and it was interesting because at the time, we had election results come in at the Coleman Center at the fairgrounds.
Okay.
And they came in one precinct at a time. And so there are 58 precincts in Wayne County. And for the first 55 precincts that reported in, I was in the lead by several votes, a couple hundred votes. And people started coming over and congratulating me.
Wow.
Congratulations, good luck. And I said,
let's wait. Let's wait.
I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win because I knew that the precincts that had not yet been reported were in Jefferson Township, which happens to be where I live. But I was a newcomer to Jefferson Township. I'd moved out close to Hagerstown, and Chris Beeson, who was a lifelong Hagerstown resident and just a great guy, was the person I was running against, and I said, "No, Chris is going to clean my clock in Jefferson Township," and he did.
Wow.
And I have no hard feelings over it. I have the utmost respect, and Chris is a good friend. So, and he was a wonderful council person. Went on to become the auditor of the county and did a great job there. And I worked with him as I got onto council 2 years later. Had the opportunity to work with Chris during his 8 years as auditor, and actually I became the chairman of the Wayne County Republican Party, and had the opportunity to appoint Chris to a vacant seat on the Hagerstown Town Council after his term as auditor ran out, and that was amazing to me. And then later on, Chris ran again for a vacant seat on council and came back and had the opportunity to work with him again there. So no hard feelings. It taught me a lot. I learned a lot, things that I needed to know. And if you're determined, you come back. You don't give up. And when you fall down, you get back up on your feet and you go at it again. So if you want something bad enough, that's what you need to do, and that's what you did in college and in the business world, and that's what everybody needs to learn how to do.
You pushed through and didn't give up, and during that time period before you finally pushed through, was there anyone that maybe coached you or guidance? I mean, that was there to help you with this transition?
There were a number of people, but I would say Chris Beeson was instrumental in working with me and sharing with me, and of course the people at the time, Karen Pipes was a member of the Wayne County Republican Party and helped me a lot actually. Marge Sharp, who was at the time the president of the county council, she kind of took me aside and provided me with some coaching. And everybody in life needs that at different stages of life. Yeah. I remember Dr. Judith Redwine, who was the chancellor at Ivy Tech when I started working there. We used to talk in terms of the kind of stages of people's social development. And when you're born, you're a child, you're dependent on others to support you. And as you get older and are ready to go out on your own, you really push for independence, and you leave the nest, and you cherish being independent, and nobody can tell me what to do. I'm going to make those decisions myself. But as you mature, you become interdependent, and you not only want to make those decisions, but you want to make them with people and talk to people and reach common understanding before you decide what the next step is. And then finally, as you age, and I just went through this with my mother, who passed away last summer. 93 years old, wonderful lady. But as her health declined, she became dependent again, and so it's a life cycle. And you can't really avoid those steps without serious problems. Yeah,
so support's important. Having that voice to go to, extremely helpful in developing, going to the next stages in your life. So, where your current role? So what are some hot things on your agenda now that you're working on, projects, things you need to approve, things that maybe things that are you're struggling to get approved. What does that look like? How does all that work?
Well, one of the issues that really made my decision easier to run to be a commissioner was, in my opinion, the need for the county council, which I had been a member of for 22 years, and the commissioners to work more closely together, to communicate effectively, to talk over every issue, every decision, every funding opportunity. And I felt uniquely positioned, having been on the council for so long, and having been in leadership positions on the council, to kind of fill that gap. And so I ran for commissioner, and my promise to the 7 council people was, I will tell you everything that we're discussing as commissioners. The thoughts that we have for new programming, the thoughts we have on prioritizing, the challenges that we face on budgeting. I'll share all of that with you, and I want to work with you to make sure we're making the best decisions. And I believe I have done that. And I believe if you talk to them, they'll say that I have done that. I've met that commitment. And consequently, we work very effectively together. It doesn't mean we agree on everything. I think it would be difficult to find a group of 10 people who agreed on everything, and probably not very healthy. But we're at least able to talk through all of those issues. And if we disagree, that's why you take a vote, to see where people stand. And if we're on opposite sides of that vote, okay, let's move on to the next thing. The decision has been made. Now let's move to the next thing. Doesn't mean I won't at some point bring it up again and see maybe if you've changed your mind. But let's work together on what we can work together on, and keep moving things forward. We had an opportunity and a challenge with COVID. So I was elected in 2020. That campaign was really strange because of COVID. Nobody was meeting together. You didn't shake hands with people. Fist bumped maybe, or elbow bumped, and people were wearing masks and all of that, and people were scared. And so the campaign was different than other campaigns. But so I took office as a commissioner in January of 2021. The pandemic was still going on, but the federal government at the time adopted the American Rescue Plan, and that American Rescue Plan allocated money to all states, counties, cities, and towns. And Wayne County received $12.8 million from the federal government, with certain stipulations on how we would spend it to get through the COVID challenge. I remember at the time thinking, if I were in Washington, I don't think I could support this. I really thought it would be inflationary, and it turned out to be. But as a Wayne County commissioner, I thought, they're going to give this money out. We deserve it just as much as any other location in the country. And so let's make sure that we spend this in the best way possible. And so we became part of a program that the Office of Community and Rural Affairs with the state of Indiana put on, called HELP, the Hoosier Enduring Legacy Program. And so we went through a planning process. We invited all of the city of Richmond and all of the towns to participate with us, and the city chose to, along with 6 of the towns in Wayne County. And so 8 governmental entities worked together on a planning process. We came up with a strategic investment plan. We spent or are spending about $12 million, give or take, on improvements to our community. Things that we ordinarily would not be able to do because of the challenge of finding funds to do it. So a lot of things, sidewalk projects, sewer projects, water projects, park projects.
This is out of the initial 12.8?
Well, the county had 12.8 million. The city had $7.5 million.
Okay.
The small towns had significantly less than that. But your commitment as part of this program was to commit at least 30% of your ARPA funds to implementing projects that were identified through this planning process. The county ended up committing about half of our money to various projects. One of which is something I'm really proud of, because I've heard for the last 30 years, and it goes back farther than that, that our emergency radio system that police and fire use to communicate with each other in emergencies and ambulances and so on, had never been what it should be, and there were dead spots across the county. And so we used those dollars that the county received from ARPA. We first hired a company to do a test to see where are all the dead spots, identify where there were challenges, where there were problems. We knew where most of them were, but we wanted to make sure we could commit that in a systematic way. And so we mapped where the problems were, and then we located 2 sites that if we put antennas up there on towers, that it would dramatically improve the communication system. And so we are in the process of doing that. We're buying pagers and radios for the volunteer fire departments that are challenged with resources and aren't able to do that themselves. The sheriff's department, the Richmond Police Department, Richmond Fire have more resources, and they already had that equipment. But we purchased that. We're working on the towers as soon as the weather breaks. So by this summer, we hope, or this fall at the latest, with an investment of about $3 million, we will have beaten this emergency radio problem that goes back 40 plus years. Wow. So I'm very proud of that. Another project that is being completed, will be completed this spring. The 5 of the small towns decided that something they needed to do was improve their parks and in particular the playgrounds. Some of them had the same playground equipment that was left over from their schools before school consolidation in the early 1960s. So they had playground equipment that was 50, 60, 70 years old maybe. And so we were able to work together and raise more than $100,000 for each of those 5 communities. So they all are improving their playgrounds and their parks, which is just huge. We've had some of the ribbon cuttings. I don't know that you've been able to attend one of those, but boy, the community comes together and they're just so excited about those improvements to their towns. That's exciting. And one of the outcomes that I was hoping for has come about, where we are working much more closely together than we ever have before. The county with those municipalities, we communicate, and in fact, we are now starting a new planning process because we're so far along with that former one that we started in 2021. that we're working with the Wayne County Foundation.
Okay.
And the Wayne County Foundation has hired a consultant, HWC Engineering, to work with us. We went back to the towns and invited them all again to participate. And this time, instead of having 8 entities, I think we're going to end up with 12, maybe 13 of those governmental units in Wayne County working together to develop a plan for the future. So a strategic investment plan that will take us through the next 3 to 5 years. So the collaboration, the working together, we all share similar problems and challenges, and can help each other work through those, or at the very least be a resource to each other on explaining how we did that, how we approached that particular situation, and providing some insight on how they can do the same thing.
And going to 12 or 13, would that just make everything be a little more efficient, quicker response time?
Well,
more
no,
involvement?
not
What does that look
necessarily,
like?
but
Okay.
there are 14 incorporated towns in Wayne County.
Okay.
So the more we can get them to work together, the better things will be. In some cases, they can actually collaborate. For example, in Western Wayne, some of the municipalities share a sewer system, share water, but beyond that, they can learn from each other, and that is an ongoing process. And the county certainly can work more closely by having the opportunity to talk to people face to face and gain some insight into what each other's challenges are.
So is that how, like, the projects come about, like, with the radio issue or with the parks?
Absolutely.
These projects come during the prioritization comes from these groups coming working together collectively?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And through the HELP program, each of the communities that participated developed their own plan. They identified their own projects, and then the county pulled together some of its own projects, but also some of those projects, and identified that we needed to help fund some of those projects. So we did that with the county's share of ARPA funds, and in some cases with economic development income tax dollars that the county had available. So there was an opportunity there to impact and make it possible for a project to actually be completed, because funding is the final hurdle to get over.
Is there a particular project now that you're looking to get funding for on a large scale now?
We continue to do some things with the ARPA dollars, but housing is a huge issue in this county and in most of the rural counties of Indiana. Most of our housing stock was built prior to 1960. There's not been, as you know better than I do, there's not been a significant, a large housing development start in the last, 10, 15 years maybe?
Or more, yeah.
And so one of the challenges we face is in trying to attract a qualified workforce for the businesses that are here and the ones that might want to come here in the future. People need a place to live.
Yeah.
So that was really the genesis for the Elder Bierman project, the market rate apartments that are going to go on the old Elder Bierman site. That's the driving force behind the housing development on South 37th Street. There are other projects that are being discussed, and part of the challenge is to have a mix of different housing types. Everybody doesn't dream of a little cottage with a white picket fence. They have other ideas. Maybe some people want to have a yard, and other people would rather not ever mow mow any grass in their life.
Yeah.
And it depends on where they're at in their family development, you know, if they have young children or if they're empty nesters. And so different types of housing are necessary to accommodate all of those folks. And some people love the old houses, the unique architecture that we have here. So can we put together programs to help redevelop more of those properties? So all of those things are involved. But if you want to bring people to Wayne County and at least stop the decline in population, hopefully in the next several years reverse that so that we're a growing community again, you've got to have housing.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen here lately, I've seen a lot of comments about, you know, people voicing their opinion on social media about the project down replacing the Elder Beerman building and the cost or of the rent of the rentals. I mean, what could you speak to that? How you feel about that? I mean, because all here is market rate. I mean, what is the ideal price point if you know that? And it may not be your department, but what can you elaborate on that?
What I know is that we need housing at all price points.
Yeah.
You know, and again, just as you need different styles of housing, you need different price points.
Yeah.
And so the city and the county, the Economic Development Corporation, the Chamber of Commerce, the Wayne County Foundation, and realtors and developers all across the county are looking at this and trying to figure out how do we create affordable housing of the types people want at the price point they can afford all across the county. And so it takes time, it takes resources, and we're working on that, you know, all the time. There are people that are focused on that, and in both the public sector and the private sector. And what we're finding is that the cost of infrastructure development now requires more in the way of public-private partnerships. So, you know, developers coming to us and saying, we can do this if you can do that.
Okay.
So if you provide some of the infrastructure, you know, we can build this kind of home, this many units. And so that is what we're facing. It's a different situation. You know, when I had my false start in the real estate business in the early 80s, the expectation was that developers would put in their own infrastructure. But the cost of those kinds of things have just skyrocketed, gone through the roof. And because of that, you see the cost of a new housing unit going up dramatically.
I also see the EDC has a program where they're incentivizing developers to finish out some additions.
So already platted subdivisions that need a street extended, or they need sewer extended. So they're looking to provide that public support. Those are tax dollars that would go into it. But it's going to be on a competitive basis. So you tell us what you can do and what you need in return, and so it'll come down to, I assume,
the best bid.
How many units you're able to build, of what type, for this amount of public support.
Oh, gotcha. All good stuff for community growth, and man, it's been such a pleasure having you here. I got one more thing for you. I know you're a busy guy. You got to roll. Anybody out there that you either work with now in your office, or another colleague, or a person you collaborate with, family member that you would love to just say, you know, give a shout out to today, and you know that they've helped you or whatnot. I mean, is there anyone out there that you'd love to take a second to just shout them out today? Who would it be?
Of course, my wife Cheryl, who is at work at Reed. She's been employed at Reed as a registered nurse for, I think, 41 years now, and is just a fantastic person. love her dearly, and couldn't do what I have done without her support. You know, as we talked earlier about education, you need the support of people around you. You need support of your family. Cheryl has provided that support. I went back to school and got my master's degree. I for 2 years I was in Muncie 2 nights a week, and she supported me all through that.
Holding it down for you.
I supported her as she went back to school. It's just we have a great relationship, and hi, Cheryl.
That's amazing. Jeff, you got a great story. I'm so glad we took this time to, I'm finally glad that I got a chance to get to connect with you and know you a little bit better. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here, and I can continue to wish you nothing but the best. And we'll have you back on.
That'd be great.
I see you as someone that we probably need to check in with periodically to share some updates and things like that.
Happy to do it, and thank you. And it's been a pleasure for me to know you over the years, and again to reconnect at a deeper level. So I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and it's been fun talking to you.
You're welcome. That wraps up another episode of Diamond Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend.